Welcome to the 20th episode of Behind the Campaign, the podcast where marketers pull back the curtain on some of their favorite marketing campaigns. I'm joined today by two of the team members at SalesAI. We've got Sterling Kern, who is the Chief Operating Officer, and Troy Purdue, who is the Director of Marketing. Welcome, gentlemen.
Glad to be
Yes,
here.
welcome. Thanks.
So, to start off, for those who are not familiar with SalesAI, tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah. So Sales AI is AI messaging agents for sales and customer support. So we work with organizations that have high inbound traffic. I'm really focused on helping streamline speed to lead use cases and speed to support use cases, especially for customers that don't have the capacity to scale their human headcount, really being able to provide better service for those prospects and customers as they first come in.
So, the campaign we're talking about today has to do with IndyCar, which is very timely, especially here in Indianapolis, where the month of May is like an entire spectacle, really, around racing. There's so much that goes on in the racing industry in Indianapolis in May. But you guys sponsored a IndyCar, and this is the second year you've done this. Tell us a little bit about how this came about. Was this something that you thought of and you wanted to do, or did it kind of come about organically?
Yeah, it definitely came about organically, as I'm sure most of these situations do. So we're actually a very close relationships with a company called Invest here also in Indianapolis. They're actually right down the road from our home office here on 96 and Keystone. And Invest has a really good relationship with Jack Harvey. Jack Harvey is actually the commentator for Fox, and he's like the trackside reporter throughout the entire IndyCar season. And he had driven in the past, and Scott Jared, the owner of Invest, and Jack, again, they're good friends. They started to have a conversation about what it would look like to get Jack back in the driver's seat, and that really sparked the whole thing. And so Scott reached out to us, and we, of course, have a very large passion in IndyCar, just in general, being here in Indianapolis, growing up with the race and everything like that. And, we leaned into the opportunity as it came up, and we just jumped right in. Last year, we maybe jumped in a little too quick. Maybe, didn't do as good a job of the activation, but we really learned a lot over the course of last year. And Troy's really helped us, go from what we implemented last year to really capitalizing on the investment this year, the second time around.
So, Troy, as since your name was brought up, tell us a little bit about what you guys learned from last year's activation that maybe, as Sterling said, was a little bit shotgun, and how you implemented those changes for this year.
Yeah, so as Sterling mentioned, last year I made a quick decision to sponsor a car and we sponsored a car. That's about the extent of what we did last year. This year, when we said, hey, let's sponsor a car again, we think there's a lot of opportunity there. As Sterling mentioned, we all love the race here in Indy. It is a spectacle. And as a startup, we figured, hey, what a great opportunity for us to get the Sales AI name out there beyond just having it on the side of an Indy car. So when we made that decision, late last year, we said, let's really do it. Let's figure out how we can go beyond just the side of an Indy car and really make this a brand awareness campaign for the entire Indy market.
So, there's obviously a lot that goes on in Indy in the month of May. There's obviously the race, but there is a lot of company involvement, whether it be, like you said, names on the cars or on the driver's suits or advertisements, or like I mentioned earlier, all of the things that go on in the month of May. So, what did you do that went beyond just kind of sponsoring the car this year?
Yeah, so we probably went maybe a little bit bigger than we originally anticipated when we had the conversation late last year. But from a brand awareness perspective, we stepped back and said, what is the best way to reach a large audience in any market? And the answer that we came up with was billboards. So the first thing that we started to run down was, who are the companies that own all the billboards in the Indy market, and what is the share of billboards we can take for about 3 months around the race? So we ended up securing 53 billboards, a number that is, somewhat unfathomable, really, if you think about a billboard campaign in the Indy market. So that billboard play really allowed us to spread the Sales AI name across not just the tight Indianapolis market, but really the central Indiana market. So we started there. And then as part of a sponsorship, we get access to certain events around the track. So really started to figure out how can we make those also a spectacle, live up to what the race day brings. So whether that's through suites, whether that's through dinners, other activations, we really wanted to play big in all aspects of everything that we did around the race. Billboards being the biggest one, though, right? To everybody that we've talked to so far in May, when we bring up the SalesAI name or they see our logo on a shirt, like, oh, you guys are the billboard company, right? So everyone is just equating our name with all the billboards around town. Secondarily to that, though, we did a huge digital push as well. So really wanted to not only have kind of the out of home opportunity with the billboards, but wanted to make sure that we were showing up on the devices that people were using in the Indy market. So we ran a big Google display campaign targeting the Indy metro area as well. So really trying to have that kind of multimodal opportunity to spread brand awareness for the Sales AI name.
And Sterling, you mentioned earlier this kind of partnership with Invest that you did. Did you do that last year as well, or just this year?
Yeah, yeah, that we did do that again this year, and we aren't the only sponsor of the car. There's some other sponsors as well, and so this year also, we've learned, Invest has learned, we've learned how to collaborate a little bit more with some of the other groups, and that's just sharing some of the events, bringing different, invitees into each other's booths and cross pollinating a little bit more. So I think we still have area to improve there, but I think that, we definitely did a better job this year of interweaving the different groups and partners that we all brought along.
So, Troy, from a marketing perspective, how did that collaboration work? Because you also had Dreyer and Reinbold in the mix. Did you guys all kind of work together on creative ideas and decide together kind of where you were going to cross pollinate and where you were going to do things separately? I'm always curious how, when different companies come together to collaborate on marketing projects, does it work well? How do you decide who does what and all of that?
Yeah, I think we did mainly work with Invest on some of the cross collaboration of campaigns. For example, we did a big photo shoot with Jack, rented out a space, brought him in. That really drove a lot of the creative that we use for our campaign. On the flip side, Invest worked with a production company and they did a huge documentary style hype videos that they're doing. They actually just released one this week. They've got another one, I think, that they're releasing Saturday. So we'll be able to use some of that footage and some of the campaigns that we do. Certainly, as Sterling mentioned, a lot of areas for opportunity. Right? We're still learning in our second year of doing this. I think there is opportunity, if we continue to do this into the years, into the future, to work even tighter with some of the other sponsors of the car. So as Sterling mentioned, Dry and Reinbold, HC Invest, us, and some of the others, creating a more cohesive, probably campaign around the Jack Harvey car in particular. We can accelerate that probably next year, but this year was mainly with the Invest team.
So I'm sure that you took ideas that came out of last year's activation and tried to incorporate those into this year's campaign. Did you also look at any other companies that were doing similar things in this space and kind of how they were doing it? You mentioned you kind of wanted to go bigger. We've got, yeah, obviously the large companies here in Indianapolis, like Lilly and some of the others who do this on a regular basis. Did you have the opportunity to kind of take a look and research and see how they were doing some of these things and weave that into this year's campaign?
Yeah, we did, but a couple things, differentiate us from maybe, companies like Lilly. Number one, we're a small startup, right? We're a small team, very small marketing team. And so we definitely don't have the resources of a Lilly or some others to do really, really big plays. And second, we are not a name that is known across the indie market, right? A lot of the sponsors that you see sponsoring these cars, the Java Houses, the Lilies, the Splendas, the Penske's, those are name brands, right? You could ask anybody about those companies and they could tell you exactly what they do and who they are. SalesAI didn't really have that positioning available to us. So we really took a step back and said, yeah, we could maybe mimic some of the ways that these companies market their partnership with the cars, but would we get the same value out of it that they get? So we said, how do we lean into the brand awareness play? How do we make Sales AI more of a known entity in the any market? So we took maybe a different, unique way to do that than maybe what some of the other sponsors do.
And it sounds like you're creating a whole lot of content during the month of May. Are you planning on then utilizing that content in your marketing for the remainder of the year? And how do you plan on weaving that into once the race is done and you have all this great content? How are you going to use that in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's something that we definitely sat down at the beginning and said, how do we make sure the runway of this investment is beyond just the month of May? So a couple things that we are looking to do. Number one, we want to create a documentary from everything that we've done, really from April through May. I think there's a real opportunity to show other marketers how a small startup like SalesAI, 50, 60 people team with a small marketing team can do big activations like an IndyCar sponsorship. I think that's a lot of companies our size probably don't think they can play in big spaces like that. So we really want to kind of lay the groundwork and show them kind of the playbook that we took to do something like this. So a documentary is something that we're working on that we can certainly use beyond the month of May. I think the other thing is how do we leverage the brand awareness that we've captured during this, kind of 90 days leading up to the race? How do we then catapult that into campaigns that really move beyond just brand awareness and into understanding the value and who Sales AI is. So we will definitely use a lot of the content that we're capturing, leading up to the race and post race in those campaigns, kind of through Q2 into Q3, and hopefully, through the end of the year.
And you mentioned, like the Lilies and the Splendas, you are also different in the fact that you are B2B, right? So, how did you
Mhm.
connect the dots with this being a very large public consumer type event and who you were trying to reach from a customer perspective?
Yeah, that was when I'll say when I first started and learned that they had sponsored an IndyCar last year and then didn't, maybe do a ton of activations around it. My first thought was, we're never doing that again. As a marketing person that owns a budget, we said there's probably better ways that we can spend that money to sell to companies, right? To get our name out there. But once I understood the passion of everyone on the team around the sponsorship, the relationship we built with Jack and the Dry and Reinbold team and the Invest team, it really made sense to continue to do that and just build upon that sponsorship with additional activations. But you're absolutely right. We're not a consumer company. We're not out selling to individuals, but brand awareness is still brand awareness, right? And if we have the opportunity to own that B2B relationship in our own backyard, there's still opportunity for us to make a campaign like this work. Again, we kind of leaned into the activations where we said, how can we reach the people that need to know who Sales AI is? And there are a lot of whether they're buying necessarily individually from Sales AI like a consumer would, but there are buying teams within the organizations that we sell to. So it's not just about reaching one person at one business. It's about reaching buying teams within all the businesses that we want to reach. So we kind of took the stance of, yes, there's opportunity from a brand awareness perspective, but we really want to get our name out there with the business community. And so this activation with the billboards, with the digital campaign, and then certainly seeing our name on the wing and the motor box of the car, I think gives us that opportunity.
And I think the Indy 500 is also unique in the way that, from an Indy perspective, it's everybody in central Indiana is like invested in this event. It's not just like you're a basketball fan or you're a football fan. Like everybody gets into the game, so to speak, when it comes to the Indy 500. It's kind of a central Indiana fanfare. But if you're trying to reach people outside of this area, you also have those people coming in as well, from all over. All of the area airports are always busy around this time of year because you've got celebrities and other, we'll just call them, rich people coming in to attend the race, to be seen and all of the fanfare and all of that. So you really kind of have a wide range of people who you are, trying or watching this race. So they say it's the largest sporting event in the world. And so I think, your instinct was right maybe in the beginning to be like, I got a budget. I'm sure this wasn't cheap, but just the amount of people who would see all of this content that you're putting out in there must be be immense.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting topic there with the airport. So we haven't talked about this yet, but we actually do have some advertisements in the Indianapolis airport as well. So as you're coming down the escalators into baggage claim, we have a video ad that runs right above the escalator, and then we have the pillars on either side of the escalator with Sales AI, as well as video at all the baggage claims. So we knew that there was going to be a lot of traffic coming in to the city for the Indy 500, but also for all of the other events that happen in Indy, right? We are somewhat that convention capital of the world here in Indy, so there's always things happening in the city. For example, we had the Final Four here this year. We had our advertisements up in the airport for the Final Four. We had the what is it the NFL combine here, right? So there's a lot of events that are happening in Indy, and we wanted to capture that traffic coming in and out of the airport as well. So we do have advertisements there. Another unique thing too, you think about, or you mentioned reaching people outside of just the Indianapolis market, and this was just kind of a coincidence, a nice happenstance that happened. But FS1 Fox Sports does all of the video. They live stream all of the practices and things that are happening at the track on FS1. Just by chance, they showed our billboard on the FS1 broadcast multiple times when they were talking about Jack Harvey. So we got a lot of brand awareness play outside of the indie market for everyone watching all the practice days, where they just kept showing our billboard with Jack that's right outside of the track, which was really, really cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, so you've mentioned a couple of times brand awareness. How do you measure all of this? Because you've got so many pieces going on, and this can be really hard to measure.
Yeah. That's always the $1,000,000 question with, right, how do you measure it? And so we took a couple unique angles. Number one, we have some dedicated URLs that we put on the billboard so you can measure traffic to those websites. But beyond brand awareness, what we also wanted people to do is just interact with an AI voice agent. A lot of people equate AI voice agents with the spam calls that you get, right? Everybody gets those calls all day long. That's not what Sales AI does, right? So how do we create that differentiation on AI agents that actually assist businesses in growing their revenue and gaining efficiencies away from those spam type calls? So on our billboards, we actually created some unique AI agents specific to this campaign. One agent is what we call a things to do around any agent, which is the number that we have in the Indy airport and around a couple billboards around town. You can call that agent and ask it questions around, hey, I'm looking for an Asian restaurant on the north side of Indy. I'm visiting for an event. Can you help me find something? And that agent will direct you to some potential options that you have. Or, hey, I'm interested in live music. I'm here for a couple nights. What's happening around town? Another agent we did specific for the race is we built a track agent. So you can actually call that agent, ask questions around the history of the Indy 500, history of the IMS. It'll give you live updates on qualifications and speeds for the drivers. So we wanted to find those unique ways that people could interact, not just with Sales AI, but with AI agents in general from a voice perspective. And so we can track all that on the back end, right? We see how many calls are coming in. We can start to see kind of what kind of conversations are happening with those agents. So not only can we measure just from a brand awareness perspective, but we can also see how people start to learn and interact with different types of voice AI agents at the same time.
Yeah, one of the things we talk a lot about internally is just the adoption curve, right? And the pace that the technology is advancing far exceeds the pace at which, humans are adopting to it and taking it within their businesses or as consumers. And so when we're thinking about this campaign, yes, there's a brand awareness campaign for Sales AI as an organization, but there's also like a focus point to get people in the community specifically focused on like what it actually feels like and to actually interact with an AI engine because a lot of people never have even had that experience, or if they have, they weren't aware that they were interacting with an AI agent. And so just, creating a space where we can, provide a more comfortable first experience with an AI agent and leave a positive impact, right? If you're excited about the race and you're calling about the race or you're coming in the city, like you can have good interactions with an AI agent that has no ask from it and ultimately change the mindsets and get people comfortable with adopting and using this type of technology.
You also have another initiative that you're working on here in the Indianapolis area to kind of help improve the standing, I guess, of everyone within the Indy area when it comes to AI. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have a community called AI Indy, and the focus of AI Indy is to ultimately increase the adoption and the competency and education for Indianapolis as a whole in terms of consumers, businesses, and even the public sector in terms of how we're actually using this technology, how we're thinking about it, and creating space for conversations around it. Indianapolis, 5 6 years ago, was starting to get a lot of hype and momentum around being an up and coming tech hub, and slowly that fizzled out, whether it was through COVID or whatever. I do believe it's through COVID and a lot of the talent being distributed because of remote work. But ultimately, we've lost a lot of that momentum that we had 5 or 6 years ago, and so really focused on bringing that momentum and that energy back into the city and bringing Indianapolis from a reactive city to a proactive city in terms of AI, in terms of how we're adopting it, the conversations that we're having, how we're thinking about it at the public policy level, and ultimately the impact that we're making, within businesses across the state.
Very nice. I can't wait to hear more about that
Yeah.
because this is fairly a new initiative, correct?
Yeah, within the past 9 months. And so early, just keeping it small, really learning, having a lot of deep conversations, putting on some different events just to drive education and similar, brand awareness and create some of that community. And now, once we gain a little more capacity back after the month of May, I'm going to put some significant focus into really establishing, a stronger foothold in the city and really making sure we have that impact. And one of the things that we did do with AI Indy as well as we did have a few billboards in pairing with our Sales AI billboards across the city. And we've actually, in regards to, you asked the question about tracking, we've had a significant amount of just natural organic inbound on AI Indy about people just very, very curious and want to learn more, want to join the group or even want to help out. And so, that provided us internally a really good signal that the message is landing and that there's a lot of opportunity to really create a bigger impact across the city with AI Indy.
You kind of brought it back to the billboard. So you mentioned there's 53 billboards out there. That sounds like a big task. Were there any other challenges in rolling out this campaign that you maybe chuckle about now because you're past them, but at the time you were scrambling trying to figure out what you were going to do from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, designing billboards. That was a big challenge. That was something that we hadn't done. I'd done it in a past role before, but not at this scale. And there was a lot of back and forth on what are the angles that we take on a billboard, right? For sales AI. Do we lean really heavily into like humor or like you think when you do digital ads, it's like, what's that scroll stop, right? How do you get someone to actually take 3 to 5 seconds to stop and just see what's happening? A billboard, you're not going to have somebody pull over on the side of the highway, right, to read a billboard, but you still have to capture some attention in a very short period of time. And you've got to get a message across that they can digest in a very short period of time. So we spent probably uh, I, weeks, if not probably 30 days, going back and forth on what do we even want these billboards to say? How do we want to position it? 53 billboards gives you a lot of opportunity to do different things. And we did a mix of static billboards and digital billboards. So we had some leverage to test with some of the digital billboards because you can swap those out usually at no cost. But yeah, biggest challenge, what is that message? And then how do we design it, right? To make sure that we're using the real estate we have on each of the boards effectively. Again, we're a very small team here at Sales AI. The marketing team is very, very small. So we used an outside designer to help us, actually with the creative aspect of it. And we did the photo shoot with Jack so that we had some of those creative assets used there. I'm actually on some of the billboards. So the billboards with a guy in a racing helmet where you can't tell who it is, that's actually me. So we use some of our own internal staff, to generate some of that creative. But yeah, it took a lot of time, effort, and energy just to figure out what we wanted to do, and how we wanted to position the brand, in the indie market.
Yeah, and it goes back to that idea of like you're a B2B company, right? You need to make
Mhm.
money. You need to reach out to those people who can hire you for your services and for your platform, but also having these billboards that are very public and that, on your name on the race car and all that. When you talk about messaging, I'm like, that I can imagine that's probably a really big challenge. Like, do
Mhm.
you focus it more towards that audience that needs to pay your bills, or do you focus it more towards the audience that is a more general audience that is going to see those billboards?
Yeah, it was really both, honestly, because people didn't know who Sales AI was. We really started this and said, let's be a little bit more high level and let's just talk maybe conceptually around kind of what we do, right? We win conversations, right, with AI agents. We help drive delight in the interactions that people have with businesses. So we tried to take some of those themes onto the billboards, intentionally being a little bit vague, right? We could have created a billboard and said, we'll sell you AI voice agents, right? We could have been very direct and very explicit. We didn't really want to do that because, number one, we weren't sure how that would land. And we wanted to create somewhat of a little bit of ambiguity. So when you think about, every campaign that you do, you sit down at the very, very beginning and you say, what are the goals of this campaign? Not every campaign's goal is to drive X amount of revenue or X amount of leads or to move the needle on this KPI. Sometimes it's just around, hey, we want to drive brand awareness or we want to test a message or test a creative, right? So there's different angles that you can take on the campaign. For this one, it was somewhat of a mix, right? Because we can track the interactions with some of the billboards, we knew that we could generate some leads from this. We knew obviously we were going to generate some brand awareness and hopefully some brand trust through interactions with some of the agents that we had. We also wanted to make sure that we were socializing our sponsorship of the Jack Harvey number 24 car, right, with Dreyer and Ryan Bolton Invest. So there was some different angles that we took for the billboard, but we also wanted to thread a consistent theme across all of them. So if you saw different billboards, whether it was a racing billboard or a Sales AI billboard or a things to do billboard, you knew every time you saw those, it was Sales AI that was driving that message and you were connecting it back to our brand. So yeah, so a lot of different, discussions on how we do that and how we get to, some of the end goals that we had set out for the campaign at the beginning.
Yeah, and we do work nationwide, but obviously with this whole billboard campaign and the month of May and everything, we were very, very focused on Indianapolis, our own backyard, right? And so to get some more like tangible output from the billboards and the investment and IndyCar and everything like that, we have additional campaigns going. I kind of call it like a ecosystem of campaigns that are all supplementing each other. And so like the billboards supplement the investment in IndyCar and vice versa. But also with like our outbound strategies, our paid ads, like we are focusing that very specifically and focused on the Indianapolis region during this time period. And so that aerial cover has helped a lot, whether it's dropping off tickets to prospects or, having a customer dinner. It's just anything that we can do with the activations we have, leveraging that and doubling down on the local investment. Additionally, we have a campaign with a nonprofit called New Shoe Day. So we donated to this nonprofit. Essentially, they help kids get brand new shoes. Most of the shoes that get handed down uh, to kids in need are actually used and maybe a little already torn up. And so this is an opportunity to provide them brand new shoes. So it's a really, really good cause. The individuals that run it are big runners, and I'm a big runner, and I saw this campaign going on, and so I decided like it's a perfect fit for a donation for Sales AI. And essentially, the campaign that Egan Montgomery is putting together to continue to promote it is tied around a lot of the billboards, a lot of the IndyCar sponsorship, and he's been able to make very tangible introductions that are going to be beneficial for Sales AI or AI Indy in the community and everything like that. And so it's really creating an ecosystem of different things within each campaign that can all supplement each other.
So, obviously, the people that you are trying to reach, potential customers, have a certain level of understanding and maybe appreciation for AI that maybe the general public, there's a little bit of backlash against right now. We've seen it here in the central Indiana area with data centers, and we've seen even more recently, people speaking at graduations getting booed when they talk about AI, those kinds of things. Have you experienced any of that backlash? Or if you did, how would you kind of handle that?
Yeah, I'll start here, Troy, and then pass it over to you. But
Sure.
yeah, absolutely. We've seen some of that. Now, there is a little bit of bias to the people that come inbound interested in sales AI. They're probably naturally comfortable with AI in some
Mhm.
shape or form, and interested in implementing something in their business. Early on, early in the business, we focused on like now we have really transitioned to more focus on the actual problems that we're solving for businesses. And at the end of the day, like that's what people really care about is their problems being solved. And so some of the messaging we have adjusted a little bit to really just focus on solving those problems rather than leading with we are an AI company. And so that's made a difference. But also, like as I mentioned earlier, we focus a lot on the adoption curve. We're still so early in adoption, and it is also our responsibility to make sure that we educate, whether it's new prospects, customers, or the local market, whatever that is. We have to educate the market in terms of what it is and what it isn't, because a lot of the negativity, and what I found is it actually comes from a lack of understanding of what the technology actually is and what it does. And it comes from a lot of the mainstream media that, they're always talking about things to make people inflamed and engage, right? And so we do have a little bit of that battle, but it's making sure that we are, a part of the education to the whole point with the billboards, is creating a space where you can interact with AI that it's comfortable and automatically is going to leave you in delight and have a positive outcome, positive experience. And so that's something that we do have a responsibility for ourselves as well.
Yeah. And I'll say anytime, I think this is probably the experience of every company that runs a billboard campaign, you get your fair share of hate messages from it,
Yeah.
right? And being an AI forward company, certainly we've gotten some of that as well. But to Sterling's point, I like to say, we help businesses drive revenue. We just happen to use AI to do that. So there is some different positioning that we take to try to get past some of the negativity around AI, kind of culturally right now.
Yeah. And Sterling, I think you were the one mentioned earlier, pretty much everybody uses AI. Like in today's modern society, they may not know it, but they're using it in some way, shape, or form. It's hard to kind of get away from it. It's just like the advent of the internet, right? Way back in the day, you guys probably weren't even born. It's so ubiquitous. It's just
Mhm.
everywhere. And it's every single day, it seems like there's more capabilities that are put out by one of the major platforms, the open AIs or the Anthropics or whatever. Every day there's a new model coming out, which can be a little bit kind of, overwhelming for people who are in this space. How do you kind of thread that message and when it comes to your specific product?
Yeah, yeah. Um, and it is overwhelming even for people like Troy and myself, right? Like every single day there's an abundance of new information that you don't know what's signal, you don't know what's noise, you don't know where to go. And so that leads me to our mission statement. Our mission statement is to make AI simple, easy, and effective to use for businesses, right? And so going back to solving the problem, less of leading with the technology, like we are building our platform to have an interface where anyone, whether they have used AI or not, if they could be, a technical wizard, or they could have just started a business yesterday and just trying to learn, how the technology can interact with their business. Like we're building the technology in a way that essentially they can log in and have a successful use case within, 30 minutes and actually implement that in the business. And so we're trying to take all of the complexity and all the noise of the world and essentially package it in a way that fundamentally can add value in your business, whether you're very competent or you're brand new in this world.
Very good. Well, we are recording this before the race. And we were talking before we hit record that there is rain in the forecast. So we're all going to, thank our stars and hope to pray and all of that stuff that there is no rain for this weekend when the race happens. And we'll be rooting for Jack and the number 24 car. And we'll see how it goes. I know you guys are very, very busy right now, this week in particular, with everything going on out at the track. So I appreciate you joining me for some time here to talk about this campaign, and we will look for that car this weekend.
There we go.
Yes. Thank you very much for having us. This has been a great conversation. And yeah, let's see Jack Harvey lead some laps and hopefully finish near the front of the pack on
That
Sunday.
would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'll
Let's
be
go,
jumping
Jack.
up and down.
Yeah. Well,
Very good. Thanks so much.
all
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks.